Back to that in the discussion. Now it's a pleasure to introduce Jone Bjornstad. He's a clinical psychologist working in the University of Stavanger as associate professor. He's a young man, very young, but still has done a lot of research, and he's a very clever researcher as well. And he will. What his research that he will present here now is part mostly of what has been done in relationship to early intervention in psychosis in our TIPS studies. Please, Jone.
Hi everyone, and thank you for inviting me. Mic drop. So I will talk about a project today that we called Everyone Needs a Friend Sometimes. It's about recovery from first episode psychosis, and the main target of this project was to identify factors for stable recovery. And it was a multi-method project, so there was both qualitative elements and quantitative elements. We used the qualitative studies really to generate hypotheses to test statistically. And the focus today will be on social factors and psychotherapy. And I really don't think I need to argue why these are important. We know that from the literature. Also, I will talk a little bit about antipsychotic treatment, because, as we know, this is also a highly social and relational treatment. In the qualitative part, we wanted to hear with people with experiences of psychosis what brought them to recovery in a way. What are the factors, what are the elements seen from their perspective? Our inclusion criteria here was stable recovery. So the first one here was symptomatic remission, where we used the international standardized criteria of Andreessen 2006. Further, we had this functional and social recovery criteria. They had to meet friends once a week, work or school 100%. This is too high, of course, but I was young and naive 4 years ago. They also had to live independently, and there was a time criteria with a minimum of 1 year stable recovery. Most of them had at least 2. So here they are, 20 people. As you can see, they work with different things. Many of them are students. And in the right column here, the red dots are the people never using antipsychotic medication. So there were 8 of these people that never used, they were offered, but they never used antipsychotic medication. After 1 year, there was 7 left using, and when we interviewed them, which was like 2 years after, 5 years after, 10 years after, there was 6 left. So in a way, there is an offer of non-antipsychotic medication for psychosis treatment in this population. The interview focus was on individual factors, environmental factors, and treatment factors. But we also had an open-ended category at the end, because we really didn't know all the things that they probably knew about recovery and from psychosis. So we asked them, is there anything to add here? Is there anything we have missed? Just bring it along. Our analysis was thematic, and we were 4 independent reviewers. Also, we had a person with psychosis experience that now had stable recovery with us doing the full analysis. And also 1 auditor that really checked that we did as we said. The first paper on this we called the central role of self-agency. And the main theme here was establishment, or really re-establishment for many, of the subjective feeling of self-agency. Here it was like they started to believe that change was possible. That was the core of it. All of these people said that they needed, to achieve this condition, they needed some kind of specialized care in the beginning. So they needed professionals, together with family members and friends and all that stuff, but they needed some specialized care in the start. After a while, when agency levels were higher, this need was not that strong anymore. Also, we had 4 subcategories or sub-themes, in a way fueling increase in self-agency. Environmental support, gentle pressure, individually tailored assistance, and antipsychotic medication. I will come back to the latter one. So here is a citation of the establishment of self-agency. I increasingly wanted to live again. I said to myself, you can give up. You can't give up, you have to rise up. After repeating this routine and pushing myself to do stuff, I gradually started to believe that change was possible. This was a big turning point. I started to do more stuff after this. It was good for me. Here's another citation, I love this one. Understanding one's vulnerability. In a way, learning how to balance, she learned how to balance herself, control herself. I functioned like an old house with an old-fashioned electrical system. This was while her dog attacked me during the interviews. For example, the washer and cooker cannot be on at the same time because that would blow a fuse. You must cook wisely, choose wisely, but you can function very well. To remind myself, I also walked around with an old-fashioned fuse in my purse. Such things have been very helpful to me. I look in the purse, there's my fuse. And I'm reminded, no, I don't have the fuse in my purse anymore. I don't need it. But I have to constantly ask myself the question, how am I? What level of stress? And so. Started to learning how to regulate yourself. And also, this was a guy that worked before he had psychosis, and he was a member of a bicycle club. And he heard this radio inside his head giving him messages. And he was really, really ill. And the bicycle people came out at his house when he had ongoing psychosis. And he was dragged out on things. They said typically like, do you want to go for a ride? And he said, the radio doesn't want me to do that. But you can walk, can't you? Because he had walked to the door. So you probably can ride a bike as well. So I was dragged out on things even when I was sick. You knew that you would hear it if you didn't show. So I really just had to go. And then when I became better and could be even more open about my condition, they said, you cannot blame the sickness. You just have to participate. So it was probably that they always pushed me a little bit. They always knew where the line went. We were constantly balancing on it. So it was pretty rough, he said. Okay, so the conclusion in this paper was that traditional treatment approach with an extensive focus on risk, ill health, disease, treatment delivered by mental health professionals, and extensive use of antipsychotic medication may be counterproductive for some people experiencing psychosis. Also in this subsample, a robust sense of self-agency seemed necessary to achieve recovery. And currently, most likely chance determines whether a systematic, and systematic is important there, focus on self-agency promoting factors is present. They're at least not stated in the guidelines. So the second paper was a sub-analysis on their experiences with antipsychotic medication. Here the themes were antipsychotic drugs reduce mental chaos during the acute phase, non-stigmatizing environments were pursued to increase chances of successful use, antipsychotic drugs beyond the acute phase, considered to compromise the contribution of individual efforts in recovery, prolonged use, perceived to reduce the likelihood of functional recovery, and the last, antipsychotic medication was considered as a supplement to trustful relationships. Here's the social part of it. Okay, but most thought that antipsychotic medication was okay in the start. But also within this frame that I talked about here. They said they were kind and gave a solid impression of the word. When they recommended that I should use pills, I thought that was okay. The comprehensive information, so here information is important, made me feel safe. I took them. I think the drugs did me good and stopped the chaotic thinking. And here's a citation of the non-stigmatizing environments. It must be a place where you can be yourself. Most others used medication. It was okay to have a mental illness. You did not feel like an alien. For me, it was a big turning point before and after the ward. It made me easier to follow and commit to the treatment. And here's the final one, drugs as supplement to relationship. I think therapy was beneficial, not so much the drugs. The overly vast focus on drugs made me angry. So if it wasn't balanced with good information and in a non-stigmatizing setting. My problems were not about that. What worked when I told my therapist how I was doing, and he managed to tell me another way why I felt that way. I acquired a different perspective and became more and more willing to dedicate myself to therapy. So the conclusions in this paper was that acute phase antipsychotic treatment was mostly perceived as beneficial, but costs were often seen to outweigh benefits beyond the acute stage, and the need for a collaborative approach. We also identified in this process that there were no meta-syntheses on the literature, on the quality literature on psychotic medication. So we did one. I will not go into details here, but just the conclusions or clinical applications. We concluded in this paper that the clinical conversation about antipsychotic drugs need to include a systematic evaluation of contexts of patient experience level, patient autonomy processes, patient values and risk preferences, patient knowledge and knowledge needs, in addition to assessing the severity of symptoms of psychosis. This paper here is on back to the quality material. It's on psychotherapy. So the themes here were help with the basics, having a companion moving through a chaotic turf, creating a common language, putting psychosis in brackets and cultivate all that is healthy, building a bridge from the psychotic state to the outside world early in the course. So here's a citation about creating the common language. I started trusting her, this is the therapist, and she was good at asking the right questions and pull things out of me. Asked me kind of these a bit scary questions. It was very hard talking about it, but she helped me put things into words. She got me to open up quite a bit. Well, the sort of things you don't say to your parents or friends, the specialized settings, the specialized care. It really helped me put things into words, to find out what it really was about. That was scary. The fog lifted a little. I hadn't had that experience before. I found the missing words for these thoughts and feelings. Okay, so this one also was really important, putting psychosis in brackets and cultivate all that's healthy, because there were a lot of things that was bad during this period. He was always very clear about wanting to be in it myself. You know that he couldn't cure me. He pushed me to do work on bad days. Here is the sensitive pressure again. I can see that this was necessary in order to enable me to handle increasing workloads. It seems he knew exactly how far he could take it before it would have to become too much. So here's the sensitive pressure and how he is balancing it. Building a bridge from the psychotic state to the outside world early in the course. And this citation is really about starting early. So I think really what it's about finding something meaningful to get out of bed for, to connect to. Talking to people, talk to the psychologist and get some advice to bring along. I have become more open after therapy. I have talked to other people. Everything should be focused on functioning in the society, not on the functioning well in the psychiatric ward. So the conclusion of this paper was that therapeutic approaches sensitive to stage-specific functioning challenges seem crucial for counteracting, for example, isolation and social withdrawal. And early readjustment to everyday activities. So we used these three qualitative papers to generate hypotheses to test statistically in our quantitative material. And we focused on the social dimension in psychosis because we know that social impairment is a core in psychosis and in its recovery. We also know that people lose their social network during psychosis, and that people can increase their social functioning through intervention. So this is an area of malleability. However, when we started to dig in the literature on the social dimension, we found a problem. Namely that often many factors were collapsed into categories. So for example here, what predicts recovery when environmental support is operationalized as social support from friends, family, school teachers and work colleagues? One of them can be the entire effect. So what we wanted to do was to identify specific factors and test their separate effect on recovery. So we developed these 3 hypotheses, which also was the basis for our split of the social dimension. One dimension here was social satisfaction. We thought that might predict recovery. Then the next dimension was frequency of social meetings. And we also had found a little bit of literature on that the effect of friends may be greater than family. Also, there were some indications in our qualitative material on this. The sample here was a TIPS sample, which Jone and Olav have talked about for 20 years. We had 180 persons. Our outcome measure was clinical recovery with a less strict work and school criteria we had learned. And first we did a paper on remission, because remission is a far less advanced or complex outcome measure, so it was a much easier paper to do. But this paper, with the help from my friends, was on recovery. Jan Olav, you know, is a Beatles fan, so he came up with the title. And the results there was a result of a model-fitting procedure, really. So first we tested the dimensions against each other, satisfaction versus frequency, and as you can see, the greens are the ones significant. The red dies. And as you can see, frequency outperformed satisfaction. In the second model, satisfaction with friends were tested against satisfaction with family, and friends was the significant ones. In the third model, frequency with friends was tested against frequency with family, and friends frequency was significant. And in the final model, we used all the significant predictors from the previously significant predictors, and friends frequency was the significant one. Here's the final model. As you can see, also substance abuse and time is significant here. So our conclusions here was that there is need for a more detailed operationalization of social phenomena. This is also to target intervention. And in this sample, also individuals with social withdrawal and isolation benefited from frequency. Those assessing quality as negative, they didn't want social interaction, they had social withdrawal symptoms. Also, they benefited from frequency. So maybe at this, within this field in a way, they may not always give a precise picture of what is a useful approach. One possible explanation when we discussed these findings was the mere exposure effect. Why does this happen? And the mere exposure effect really is that frequent social interaction leads to increase in perceived social satisfaction. So basically, if we close the doors here now and stay together for like 3-4 months, we will like each other better, because due to familiarity. It's like Norwegian seeking other Norwegians when in Spain. And also there is something logical about this. Without frequency, there cannot exist satisfaction. You can't like someone you haven't met. So this could be a result from these findings. You should do this future RCT. I want to do this, of course, where you can have 2 groups, one with treatment as usual and one that have this friend intervention. For example, that you can systematically invite or ask them to contact friends early in the course and ask them to send 3 snaps, keep them updated during the course. I haven't, at least, not seen literature that says that this is harmful. Maybe provide the friends that their friends is in trouble, that they will have to support from professionals if needed, and that it is important that they are consistent due to the mere exposure effect. And then measure it on effect on recovery. It's almost free. Why should this have a plausible effect on recovery? Because it has the potential to keep people within their social loop throughout the course. We know that they lose their social network during the course. It could be a remedy, at least to some point, for loneliness, which we all also know that exists in this population. But when we did this study, we identified that our measures were old. The social functioning measures were old. Strauss-Carpenter scale, which we used, were developed in the 70s. So we started to think, what have happened since the 70s? For example, internet happened in '92, and social media came with Facebook in 2006. As we know, there are 3 billion people owning a smartphone. It's estimated to be 3 billion in 2020. We also know that people experiencing psychosis have rich online social lives, despite maybe often fewer offline friends. We also know that symptoms may manifest differently in an online context, and then the problem with false positive and negatives arrives. For example, social withdrawal. If we only, like maybe it is today, we will see, measure offline contact, and they withdraw from offline contact. What about if they have a rich online life then? Is that social withdrawal? I don't think we know that yet. Also, there is other useful clinical information that you can get in online functioning, like social media addiction, negative social comparison, cyberbullying, and of course also positive things. Also, maybe online communication is a bit different. There is a possibility for anonymity. You can have a delay in response. That is difficult with an offline contact. And we don't know really whether it requires cognitive flexibility, more or less. And that's important in psychosis, at least in acute psychosis. So we did this systematic review on social functioning measures and specifically assessed whether they measured online social activity. We also had this one, I think that was last week, where we suggest that there is need to rethink social functioning in psychosis based on this. But as you can see here, don't look at the text. You'll have a seizure. But if you look at the right column here, there's our assessment of to which degree, or if they at all assessed social media activity. And as you can see, there is one yes in this page. Here's 58 measures. We excluded 57. And that's also the only one. So and that scale is named first episode social functioning scale. It has 2 items assessing online social activity. And in these items they define chatting on the net as a solo activity. However, we know that this may be a highly social activity. Also, they define using the internet or email communication as a living skill. We think it's difficult to equate these technological skills as being representative of social activity or function. So the conclusion here was that measures do not reflect current social functioning, and the debut age of psychosis plus minus 18, maybe something like that, which also is the heaviest consumers of social media activity. So this is relevant. A possible solution to this problem may be to test elements from valid offline measures in online settings, for example, the social functioning scale of Birchwood. However, I'm 36 now, I'm not that young. A purely scientist-driven approach have clear limitations because, for example, due to the age gap. We have been around on schools now talking to young people about their habits, online habits, and I only partly understand them because they communicate in a different way now than when I grew up. So there is an age gap. So what we suggest is a collaborative approach, using, for example, principles from design thinking, where you develop something with the service users or whomever, and you prototype them. You develop a prototype, then go back to them, ask them, is this okay? What is missing? And then you go back and revise it, and this process go back and forth until it's okay. However, we also think that this process needs a theoretical grounding in a way, or an anchor. And here we suggest postnormal science, and I don't have time to talk about that. So thank you for your attention.